Hi, and welcome to the Mental Health Raw and Open podcast. I'm your host, Jody, and I created this show to have honest, candid conversations about mental health in an effort to help reduce the stigma. I am issuing a trigger warning as many of the topics we discuss may be highly sensitive for some. If you are having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to someone, go to your local hospital, or call a crisis line. In the United States, call 1-800-273-8255, and in Canada, 1-833-456-4566. So on today's show, we're going to talk with Vincent Fitzgerald. Vince is a psychotherapist. He's a writer. He writes for the Huffington Post. He writes for The Mighty. And he has his own blog. It's called Healing Prose Mental Health Blog. And it'll be good to get a therapist's view on things for a change. Vincent, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Jody. I'm really happy to be here. How are you?
I'm doing okay, man. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm sitting at home right now, relaxing. I've been looking forward to this opportunity for a while. I'm glad you and I finally have a chance to actually talk. I can hear your voice. Usually it's on Twitter, so there's not a lot of... You have a very unique Twitter voice, that's for sure, but now I'm actually hearing your voice.
Yes, absolutely. It's like sometimes you listen to the radio and you picture a host for so long and then you see them and you're like, what? That's what they look like? That's not at all what I had in my head.
It's really good to see your face.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. So what's been going on? What's the weather like in Jersey?
Right now it's gloomy and we are going through a series, just an intermittent phase of sun and then gloom and sun and then gloom. We really haven't had a consistent weather pattern here for a while.
Yeah.
Sort of
shitty up here too.
Yeah, it's pretty much indicative of where I am. You know, spring can be a lot of rain, thunder showers, and then some sun for a couple of days, but it's not usually long lasting. Mm-hmm. How about there where you are?
It's about the same, like a couple of days of sun and then, rain. It hasn't been too cold lately, which I'm pretty grateful for, but there's been a lot of rain and a lot of gloomy, dark days, which I'm not. Like, I love sun. Sun makes me happy. So I crave for sun. Even just like opening up the window in the morning and knowing it's a sunny day versus a gray day makes a difference for me.
Huge difference for a lot of people. I mean, I know where I am, we're vitamin D deprived for starters. We have an epidemic of people who are vitamin D deprived. And also what I'm seeing more and more of is this idea of low mood during the gloomier days. And for myself, I've experienced that most of my life. When I wake up and it's gloomy, I do feel a difference in my mood as opposed to when it's sunny out and birds are chirping. It's like I really have to think about wanting to start my day in a better mood when it's gloomy out.
Yeah, I see a lot of people are trying those sunlights for inside your house, give you some extra vitamin D and stuff, but I haven't personally experienced to see if they work or not. I guess whatever you can try.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think it's hard to tell what the effect is. I was on prescription vitamin D for about a month, and it was like this tiny tablet I took once a week for 4 weeks, and honestly, I couldn't tell you what the result of that is. I just know that it was low, and whether or not it's still low, who knows? But mood lamps, I think people use those a lot too during daylight savings when it begins to get dark around here at about 4:00 in the afternoon. And people have a really hard time with the shortened days. And I'm one of them. I mean, I look forward to December 21st because I know that once December 21st passes, the days begin to extend at least a minute every day. And then June 21st is right around the corner. And even though it'll be dark late, the trend begins to go in the other way. In the back of my mind, I'm very aware of that. I'm like, oh my God, the clock is going to begin to go the other way now.
Yeah, that's so true. February up here is like the darkest month of the year, I find. If we have 2 days of sun in February, we're very lucky. So it's a long, short month, put it that way.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. That's a very literary way to put it, Jody. Yeah. One of the things that, since that came up, is your writing, which, I envy your writing and I admire your writing. I wonder if you're aware of how many people do, and I know that you get a very positive response on Twitter, and I do a blog called healingprose.com. It's my blog. But I struggle with, I don't know if I'm struggling with confidence or writing style or whatever the case might be. But when you write, what I've noticed is, and what I admire most, is a very fluid style, a very raw style, a very honest style. Your voice is your own. And I think that a lot of people who are on Twitter actually admire that. I know I do because it's influential for me, even when I read your work, because it's so honest. And I feel like you're writing just as you're kind of thinking what you're thinking. And it's very, it's really good stuff, actually.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I've never been that person like to kiss ass or to be able to become another person when I'm around someone else. So I was the shittiest waitress in the world because if you
yell at me. I didn't cook your food, okay, but I'm a great bartender because all you want me to do is serve drinks and listen to your stories.
Yeah, bartender is one of the fascinating jobs, I think, in the world. People, that stereotype of being like the confessor, the person who hears all the problems and hears all the stories. And
I used to bartend at a place where I played soccer, so there's a bar up above, and I'd bartend on Sundays, and it was like a men's league all day long, and it was insane. Like, I knew the most inner dramas of their families and their friends. Like, people think, oh, guys don't talk about drama. I'm like, yes, they do.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. We tend to, the stereotypes of men with toxic masculinity and all those things, we tend to keep more things to ourselves, I think. A lot of the men who I've grown up with, a lot of the men who I've known in my own family are not very prone to expressing themselves emotionally. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I've tried to really overcome in my own life, because my father and his brothers, there's really no such vulnerability in their lives. And that's not a way that I've ever really wanted to live. So I'm kind of always teetering back and forth. So, one of the things I've written about extensively is the fact that I've been a therapist now for almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years in November.
Oh, cool.
I've been in mental health pretty much most of my life, doing school social work or psychiatric screening and so on and so forth. But one of the best responses I've ever gotten for myself is when I've written about my own anxiety disorders and what that means to me to be a clinician who's experienced panic disorder, who's experienced generalized anxiety disorder. And even, one distinct period in my life in about 2007 or 8, when I was suicidal for at least a week, when I really began to think that, panic disorder and agoraphobia had gotten me so to the point where I felt like my life was no longer going to be livable. And I began to think, what's the point anymore? Because it just doesn't seem like this is ever going to go away.
Yes.
And it was a risk for me to do that, because I think when I grew up, I wanted to be a therapist since I was 15 years old. And I always thought then of therapists as the oracles to which people showed up and we gave them solutions and they walked away happy.
Yeah.
I've never been so wrong in my life. I mean, it's really not that at all. But there was still a part of me who always felt that because I had that impression of what therapists were, that my own vulnerability should not be a part of the picture in my relationship with clients. And granted, it really depends on where I am in the relationship with a client. That determines whether or not I divulge that. Mm-hmm. But when I have the relationships with clients, it does tend to come up every now and then, because what I have found is that it normalizes the client's experience and makes them feel a little less alone and makes them feel a little less damaged or broken. Because if it can happen to me, then it almost makes it okay that it can happen to them.
Like, dead people are put on a pedestal. Therapists are sometimes, and doctors are put on a pedestal as well. And knowing that they have the same types of problems, that they're willing to express them, kind of knocks them off that pedestal from the sick person's point of view. So now you can see a little bit more eye to eye.
I couldn't agree more. I think that one of the things I've never wanted as a therapist is to be looked upon as somebody who's on a pedestal. I explain to clients very often in our work that, and I use Irv Yalom's phrase, he's a clinician, a therapist who's about 87 years old now and still practicing in California, written many books, most of which I've read. I love him. But the idea of the therapist and client as fellow travelers, as people who are really on the same path, who are in a relationship together, who experience similar things, that's the perspective from which I look at that work, as opposed to, in the old days, the psychoanalyst, the blank screen therapist who sits and analyzes and that kind of thing. I couldn't do that work because it would eliminate so much of my personality. It would almost get boring for me.
Right? Like, it's not today's way to approach therapy.
No, it's not something I could ever do. I look at therapy mainly as a relationship between two people. And in that relationship, a lot of healing can take place. And that's been a particular challenge for me with clients who experience borderline personality disorder, which is challenging. But, what's interesting about that for me is that I don't speak a lot about diagnoses in my room at all, for the most part, because I feel like what's happened with a lot of my clients, they kind of take on this identity of this is who I am and this is what I have. And when I speak with people who are experiencing those symptoms, we talk a lot about the symptoms. We talk a lot about what they're experiencing in the world. But if somebody came to me and said, I'm going to be a really hard client because I'm a borderline, I would probably say, a borderline what? Because if you're going to identify yourself as that and only that, then that's really going to make the work challenging. But on the other side of the coin, my impression of what people who experience BPD is that there's a real difficulty with interpersonal relationships and a real challenge to have a realistic view of self. And what I never do is assume that I know more about the client's life than the client does. I never assume to know more about the way the client experiences the world than the client does, or more about the client's symptoms than the client does. I have an idea, but it's only through the client's individual experiences that I learned about those things.
Yes.
So what makes borderline personality disorder so complicated is that it affects these two huge components of life, and that's a sense of self and interpersonal relationships. You experience BPD. What are your experiences like with it?
Oh, it's awful. It is so hard. Like for me, my biggest issue when it comes down to it would be abandonment, just because that's been a repetitive pattern since I was born, with the foster care homes and my mom dying and everything. It just became everything. So that is the root of all my fear comes down to that. But with BPD, it's really hard to establish a healthy boundary. So like I've been able to establish one with my father because I'm not overly close to him anyway. But if I become close to someone, it's kind of like all in or all out. We don't kind of do like toe dipping friendships or half friendships. We're not really good at that. So we like to be all in or all out, and that can be very overbearing. So when we get all in, it seems overbearing for you, and we feel it as well. So then we pull back because we think that we've scared you off and you're going to leave. So then we turn around and we push you away before you have a chance to leave. All in the meantime, we don't ever want you to leave in the first place, right? So it's just that cycle. It just continues on and on and on. And even when you can recognize it, I know what my triggers are. It's being able to instantly stop the reaction, because BPD is instant reaction. There's times where I literally have to turn my phone off and throw it in another room so I don't respond to a text or an email or whatever the case may be in a totally irrational manner, because one day I can get a text and it can be perfectly fine. 2 hours later, I can get the same text and lose my mind. It's how my mind is thinking about myself. And I compare it to wearing dark sunglasses all the time.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder how a person learns to have that self-perception, because one of the things I really believe is that these things are learned. These thought patterns are learned. You came into the world, I came into the world. There was a point in our lives when you and I both thought we were perfect, that the world revolved around us, that we were the center of the universe, all those different kinds of things. And then somewhere along the line, these other messages kind of get woven into our fabric, and we take on these different kinds of symptoms. What do you think would be the road down which you went to learn these kinds of thought patterns about yourself?
I think, the only thing in my life, I don't think I've ever been confident, and I've never been overly trusting. So even when I went to my parents' home, like at 18 months, I was still I didn't trust adults. There was just something because I'd been harmed so many times before, and even though they're not actual memories, they're still triggers of weird things. Like, for example, I couldn't take a bath for many, many years, and I can go in the ocean and swim and do it, but sit in a bathtub, I couldn't figure it out. So then a couple of years after my mom died, Children's Aid sent me a whole bunch of nonsense about my background. And one of the things was I had been left one foster home because I'd been pulled out of the bathtub because I had drowned. So then that kind of puts two and two together. Why I didn't like baths, because I had this horrifying experience that it was trapped in my brain that I couldn't get it out. And there was no correlation for 30 some odd years. I just didn't like to go in the bath, have a bath. No, I'm not having a bath. Even when I went to my mom's house, she said for the first few months she had to sponge bath me because I would literally go into terror.
Oh, that sounds like such trauma.
It is. And I think when you're traumatized so young, I believe it just kind of everything becomes, the way you look at it becomes skewed. Everything becomes a little bit darker. So people become darker and less trustworthy. And as soon as you grow up with that, the only area of confidence I really ever had in my life was soccer. So soccer was my safety, and I did play for literally 40 years. And when I stopped playing, I lost that one big chunk of self-confidence that I had. And that was a huge loss for me because I was never able to take it and transfer it over into other aspects of my life. So now a little bit of confidence I have in my writing. So that's a small replacement for soccer, but there's still a big void.
So yeah, a lot of your eggs were placed in the one basket of soccer. And once that was no longer part of your life, you kind of struggled to formulate an identity for yourself.
Exactly.
How do you identify now?
I'm struggling. I'm trying to become like a new me. It's hard for me to live in the present because I'm not as much stuck in the past. In behavioral mannerisms, I'm stuck in the past in some ways, but I think I have such a dreaded fear of the future, and it's going to sound ridiculous, but when I grew up, my mom was dying when I was 13. She died when I was 19, and it was 6 very long years. I was in and out of the hospital with her, and I saw a lot of people die. And when she passed, it was just, I don't know, the beginning and the end of something. So my life became separated by that point. So now I have, in memories, I have before my mom died, after my mom died, and now I have before my quote breakdown and currently. So I've kind of like staged everything in 4 sections of my life on how my memories are split up. So now all I'm trying to do is I'm working with a therapist I know my triggers. I'm trying to find coping mechanisms that are strong enough that I can instantly replace them instead of using something old and unhealthy.
That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. And you're working with a good therapist who's trying to kind of help you with a realistic sense of the present and the future, and even your own self. Do you find that when you and I are talking right now, that you feel like you're in the moment, that you're present with me right now?
I can, yes, I do feel that, but at the same time, there's always a part of my mind that's spinning. Like I always feel like 3 or 4 things are always going on. So I can have a completely focused conversation, and in the back of my mind, there's still a little thing going on about whatever tape is playing or whatever I'm nervous about later on or whatever. So I can be like, I'd say 75 to 80% focused on the moment.
It's one of the pain in the ass things about the anxious mind is that it constantly has us looking ahead, to the future and
Yes.
usually visualizing some awful outcome to something,
Yeah.
So for myself, having experienced even some social anxiety when I was younger, there was a point when I was working for Hudson County ICMS, which is Integrated Case Management Services. I was doing case management for the chronically mentally ill. And there was a part of me who always thought that I sounded stupid talking on the phone, that if I spoke on the phone about anything professional, it was just going to come across as dumb and not informed and all kinds of things. So I would actually wait until my colleagues would leave our cohort area before I would make phone calls to like Medicaid or social services or different things, because then I didn't have to worry about the way I sounded. I have no idea where that even came from. I know it doesn't exist anymore, but I don't have a clue. I mean, nobody ever told me that I sounded stupid. It just kind of one of those things. I mean, maybe somebody did, who knows? But it just wasn't a realistic sense of who I was. And that's one of the things I find with people who are experiencing BPD or depression, is that there's not a realistic sense of who the person is. My clients who experience it, the way they see themselves on the inside does not tend to be the way other people see them on the outside. There's a disconnect between those two things. So the reality testing is just kind of way off. And then that also happens within the personal relationship. So one of the clients with whom I worked was a young woman who experiences BPD. If I took her in 7 minutes late, if I was 7 minutes later than normal, she was in the waiting room, the theme of the session was that she wasn't important to me and I didn't care enough about her and all those kinds of things. And I'm very challenging when it comes to that kind of thing, because I want to talk about what's happening in the moment between myself and between the client. So the way I would challenge that was, so-and-so, you and I have been working together for about a year now, and we've done really good work, and you've made some breakthroughs, and I've taken you sometimes 5 minutes earlier than sessions are supposed to begin. So why is it that this 7 minutes is so much more important to you than the rest of it? Why is it that all of a sudden I've become this therapist who minimizes you, or who doesn't have the same love for you as a client or confidence or dedication to the work? Which changed? And when we had that conversation, what she was able to come up with was that nothing changed, that she just feared in the moment that suddenly she'd become less prioritized to me than other clients. And then once I was able to help her in that moment to line the reality up, the internal and the external realities, the session would get better, but it would be rocky there for a little while. And I would feel myself getting anxious, because the one thing I didn't want to happen was for the volcano to erupt, in a sense. I've seen what's called borderline rage. I know what that looks like. And it's not the prettiest thing, but I feel like if I don't challenge clients in the moment with those unrealistic perspectives, they can't heal and grow.
I think one of the biggest things with BPD is because you're always wearing dark sunglasses, so everything always looks, let's say, shitty. But the thing is, like, almost being able to hold two truths and understand that your truth is not the truth, that you see things the way you do because of who you are and your past and how you've seen things before. That doesn't make it the truth. So if you can hold space in your mind that there's your truth and then there's another truth, and the real truth kind of lies halfway in between the two.
I agree. And I think one of the things that keeps coming up that I'm hearing you mention is the idea of past and how much power the past actually holds and how much power and how much influence the past creates. And I know that the way I usually will explain depression and anxiety to my clients, that depression, people who live in the past tend to be depressed. People who live in the future tend to be anxious. And that seems to be common among all of us, I think. Mm-hmm. So clients who do rely too heavily on thoughts of the past, not only are they not staying in the moment of their lives, but they're kind of wallowing in something that is probably no longer even them anymore or no longer as relevant as it was in the past. So what are your experiences with that?
I just wrote an article about it, actually, kind of like being attached to your trauma. That's what I feel like. It's like I tell people, like, okay, so if I'm been passively suicidal and actively suicidal for 40 years, most of the time passively, I do have active thoughts and I have an excellent set of coping skills. So I know in essence that I'm safe regardless of how bad my thoughts get. But having them at the forefront of your mind or having them at the back of your mind can make the difference between, I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's like it almost changes the way that you look at things just by that one small thing alone. Things aren't pointed out to us. I think it's a great idea that you actually challenge your clients, and my therapist does the same with me, because if you don't point it out, we're still going to argue about it, that you're wrong, because our darkness is always right. Once we are out of that frame of mind and back into like a rational frame of mind, your words and my therapist's words start to make sense. It's the difference between having a rational mind and having an emotional mind, and then being able to connect the two.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I use the word challenge, I use the word confrontation almost interchangeably, because I am confrontational as, my role as a therapist, but I confrontational in a very non-confrontational way, and confrontational in a very loving way and in a very gentle way, but in a way that kind of, it just sort of needs to happen, because if I was to allow my clients to come in with that sense of reality testing where it's really kind of poor, and not do whatever I could to help that person gain some realistic sense, then I don't feel like I've done anything really. But at the same time, empathy for where that person is in that moment is necessary. It's not like I can just brush it off and say, oh, come on, what are you talking about? Realistic here. This is nonsense. That kind of stuff would never pass my lips. And I noticed that even with, Twitter, which, you and I are very active on Twitter, obviously. And what I'm seeing on Twitter now are more and more vague suicidal statements from different people all the time. Now, when I first joined Twitter 10 years ago, honest to God, Jody, it was because I wanted to follow celebrities. I wanted to get insights into their lives. If I can interact with a couple of them, that would be great. But it's really changed a lot since I began to identify more as what I do on Twitter. And same thing holds true with the vague suicidal ideations and the statements. There's not one of them that I don't take seriously to some degree, because I don't think that you cannot take somebody's suicidal ideation not seriously. So when a client comes in and says to me, you hate me because you're 7 minutes late, I take that seriously to some degree. And the same thing holds true for what I read on Twitter. Just because somebody makes several days worth of suicidal statements, that does not diminish the extent to which I have to look at the fact that, wow, this person's really thinking about this in the moment. And what does that mean? And is there some way that me or somebody else on Twitter can reach out? Because what I've referenced before is true. Actually having those thoughts for a little while in my own life, when I began to think that this was the way that I was going to be comfortable finally, that became a real thing. So I take every one of them very seriously.
I was talking to someone about this the other day. Society has this thought in its head that in order to deal with or even speak about suicide, you need to be trained, you need to be a therapist, you need to be this, that, and the other thing. And you know what? The average actual suicidal crisis the heightened point lasts 10 to 20 minutes.
I didn't know that.
The peak is 10 to 20 minutes. All someone needs, especially if they're reaching out online, 90% of the time is someone to listen and validate. And you do not need a degree to do that. You just need ears and a mouth to be able to say, yes, I understand.
I couldn't agree more. That brings to mind the idea of just how many wonderful mental health advocates exist on Twitter. And I'm not sure how many of the advocates are actively working in mental health or not, but I do know that they're all supportive voices. And I've seen so many people reach out to other people just to sort of be a lended ear or a shoulder or whatever the case is. And it speaks so much to the value of connection. And that's the other thing that I stress so much in therapeutic relationships is the idea that this is a relationship, this is a connection. And a lot of times clients of mine who experience different kinds of self-harm behavior or depression, they tend to feel less depressed in sessions because they feel so connected in the moment.
Building your zone is a safety zone, so you know that it's comfortable to say whatever you want to say without being judged.
That's a really good point. And it makes me think again about Twitter, and you don't always get that on Twitter. So I'm assuming you've had some negative experiences with Twitter.
Sure, yeah. Unfortunately or unfortunately, it goes both ways. I am who I am and I speak what I think. Times where I should have worded things different because I don't mean to worry anybody. I am expressing how I am feeling at the moment. Now, I either get 2 reactions or 3 reactions. I get 1, someone who'll try to call the cops. I'll get B, someone who'll reach out and say, yo, what's up? Do you need to talk or do you need to listen? Or I'll get the negative reaction. Oh, you've posted for 4 days in a row that you're suicidal, and if you were really suicidal, you'd already be dead, and blah, 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 nonsense like that. So that's the shit you kind of just got to wash out. And as a person with BPD, we take everything very personally. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a stranger and you can insult us and it still feels raw as compared to what I would assume a person without BPD feels. I don't know. But yeah, it's a struggle. And then I get validation when I receive so many messages from people that say, thank you, I'm thinking this too, even though I can't speak it, or thank you made it seem like it was okay to be able to tweet what I was thinking, those types of thoughts. And I think people need to understand that the more you hold them in, the worse they get. If you do not have an outlet, whatever outlet it may be, it's going to go bad. You cannot survive being suicidal for 40 some odd years by yourself. I know this. I could not have survived if I hadn't have had little bits of help here and there.
Who do you find are the people who are most helpful in your life?
Okay, so I have 2 good friends, my roommate and my ex-girlfriend. We've been friends for like 25 years now. So those 2 are like my family. I have chosen family, not real family. My dad is alive. We don't get along so well, but it's getting a little bit better. I do actually have like other family members, but they pretty much all disowned me when I first came out as gay, and second, now that I'm mentally ill. It's a long lost cause. So I pretty much just shut them down. So now I have chosen to let a few people into my life. Michael Landsberg, Sick Not Weak, he's one of my best friends. And I have some people that are just kind of like on the outside of my wall. So they're closer to me, but they haven't gotten in, if that makes sense. I like to live behind a wall with like a little peephole that looks out. And if after so long, you've almost proved, I don't just give trust, and I know that's wrong. You have to earn trust with me. And once you earn trust, then I can start taking the bricks down off my wall. So to let you in a little bit more. But
it's a great point, Jody.
If you don't do that, then I just keep piling. I'm a bricklayer building a castle.
A lot of things. I think that trusting everybody is probably as dangerous as trusting nobody.
Yeah.
I think that this has to be a very select few people in our lives. And I tell clients all the time, and I even try to live this myself, you can't go around just blindly trusting everybody, because it's a really good way to be certain that you're going to get hurt over and over and over again. We have a very interesting relationship with intimacy as human beings. We crave it in amazing amounts of ways, but we can also be highly allergic to it at the same time. So the minute it gets to be, and that seems to be the way people with BPD experience the world, is that idea of, I want you close, but I really don't want you too close. I might push you away, almost like enter at your own risk.
It's like tug of war. That's what I feel like. Pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling. And you don't want to do it because you see at a certain point when you've gone through a little bit of your therapy, then you can step out and see what you're doing. You just can't stop it yet.
So stopping it would be the harder part. Even when you get some semblance of insight, it's still the judgment that tends to be the hardest.
Right, because I think when you've reacted in a certain way for so long, it's just become instinctual. And they've taken scans, obviously you probably know, of people's brains, and you can see like certain underdeveloped areas with people with BPD, and especially the amygdala, which is like the emotional control center. So if that's hyper alert or not working, you either have a completely emotional brain being flooded with chemicals and you can't control anything, or you're completely shut down. Now, in my case, a lot of BPD people say they'll get highs and lows. I have persistent depressive disorder
as well as major depressive disorder. So I stay on a flat line, and then I go down, and then I go back up. But I never really get up, and that's where my problem lies. So getting the peaks above the straight line is what we're trying to do in therapy, or to learn how to feel happy again, because I feel like I don't know how to do that anymore, if that makes sense. I feel like I've lost that ability.
It does make sense. Depression is an incredibly interesting thing because of the spectrum on which it sits. And as I'm looking at you right now, you may experience depression internally very different than the way it's portrayed outwardly. Like right now, I would never look at you and say there is somebody who is severely clinically depressed. You look well, your hygiene looks good, you're wearing earrings, you care about your hair, you look well. However, on the inside, you might be experiencing things very differently.
That's absolutely true. It's so funny because when I started this podcast, I was like, oh my God, like writing is safe because there's no instant reaction. So when I decided to do my podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it tape, not live. So there, again, I edit out if I do anything stupid. So then I go back and I listen to it. I'm like, oh my God, that's what my voice sounds like. Holy shit, I can't listen to this anymore. How am I going to do this? And all those little insecurities that couldn't, like, they don't even make sense. They're highly irrational, but they just like come flooding, like the anxiety just comes flooding. And then you build up this big picture of this disaster that's going to happen. And then really when you do it, it's just like having a normal conversation. It's not really as hard as I thought of in my head. It was like, oh my God, people are going to think this and that, and they're all going to say shitty things, and better get prepared, build your wall back up. And now I'm kind of like, all right, it's not as bad as I thought, so let's see what it's like when it's out there.
Sure. And the unfortunate truth is that some people are going to say the things that you fear most, but not all of them.
Yes.
And I think that needs to be recognized, is that not everyone feels that way. A lot of people seem very aligned with you and rally behind you and are connected with you through Twitter. And I think that that's one way to be connected. I don't substitute social media as a means of connection, actual physical connections in the real world. I tell people this all the time because it's so relevant, but it's definitely a good start for people who haven't been connected to people for a really long time. It's at least a good way to start. And one of the things is, as I'm thinking again about your writing, and now I'm seeing you in this other medium, you have courage to do this, and I've never done this. Because it's one of those things that it's like, well, that's a real risk. You know, when you do a podcast and you're responsible for reaching out, getting people to be on it, putting yourself out there in social media, and your face and your voice and your personality, that seems like a big risk. And here you are taking
risk, and I don't even know why. I can't say. One day I was just thinking about it, and someone said to me, you know what, like your writing has gotten to a certain point and it's really good, but you could probably reach more people if you podcast. I was like, I'm podcast. Who the hell wants to listen to me? I don't even want to listen to my own thoughts half the time. I never actually want to submit someone else to have them as well. And then I was just like, it can't be that bad. So I listened to a few podcasts and a couple of interviews, and then I went on as a guest on a few podcasts. I was like, oh, it's really not so bad. So then the hardest one I did was my introduction one, which I'm going to release on Thursday, because that was just me talking to myself. So I stopped and started that like 45 times. Literally, I was like, oh my God, halfway through you'll hear it. And then I'll go back and delete everything and start all over again, because it's weird talking to yourself. It just seems like odd. When I'm talking to someone, it makes sense. But when I'm talking to myself, trying to relay, I'm not even sure what message. I'm just kind of trying to give a brief introduction to who I am and why I started the podcast. Mm-hmm. And that was my hardest interview.
Oh, sure. It's almost, like a director who does like 45 takes.
Yes.
One scene, trying to get it right. What's going to be the right way? You mentioned before the amygdala. I love talking about that stuff with my clients because I refer to it in sessions as the infant brain, because it, as you said, and you've obviously done a lot of research on this, it's the part that is so much responsible for emotional reactions and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And whenever my clients, especially in couples work, if I talk to clients about how, we tantrum with one another in a sense, like, well, your amygdala kind of took over there. And here we are, these wonderfully evolved species that we are, who has this heightened forebrain. And yet sometimes we just let the other part take over and we forget all about that evolved part. Yeah. Do you find that happens a lot in your own life, where that amygdala just takes over?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I call it the reptilian brain almost. It's like it's just an instinct. Like if you went up to a crocodile and wanted to slap it, it would bite you. So that's the same kind of instinct. It's just a quick reaction that has been going on for so long. It just is. It seems like it is a part of who you are. And I don't think until you really get into like some deep trauma therapy and understanding that the brain isn't
correctly wired, some paths are leading down the wrong path, but that's not unfixable. And I think that's so important that people need to read. I encourage everybody to just look up neuroplasticity if you have any sort of depression. If nothing else, it encourages you that there is hope.
That's a beautiful.
You can rewire your brain. You can learn new ways, and all these old habits don't have to be forever.
It's a beautiful message. My introduction to mental illness was my mother, and from the period of my life when I was 8 until I think 11, she spent more days than not in psychiatric hospitals, and she experienced a major depressive episode, and had a lot to do with the pressure that she felt taking care of her dad who had had a stroke, my father, putting pressure on her to be more part of our family, taking care of 3 kids and so on. And eventually when she broke big time. And she was gone for the better part of 3 years. When I think about, she and I talked about it in subsequent years. She just recently passed 3 months ago, but we spent a lot of time talking about her mental illness and the effects it had on her, and shock therapy and medications and hospitalizations, and how she would come out of the hospital for a week at a time and just disappear in the middle of the night and go back because she had just had too much of life on the outside. Mm-hmm. And that ended for her in, I guess, 1980. And then she was discharged from the hospital for the last time. She never went back to the hospital again. And she lived a life that was void of major depression for the rest of her life.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sorry that she passed so recently.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it. But she is the person who gives me the most hope that people can overcome significant mental illness. I have to believe in the hope of it, or else I wouldn't do what I do. And I feel like, hope can be a very touchy subject in the mental health world, because if it's said the wrong way, if it's expressed the wrong way, people can take it as you don't understand, or you don't know what you're talking about. So people out there who use phrases like, you just have to push through and you can overcome this and so on. And it has to be done in a very delicate way. I mean, that's why I tend to use personal experiences more than anything else, because at least there's an evidence in that. It's not just a statement like, come on, push through this, you could do this. My mother's experience is the one from which I draw the most, because it's real and it happened with her. Mm-hmm. So that's where I get so much of my hope.
That's good, because I think it's a fine line hope, because you can come out and say, there's so many treatments out there and you got to just keep on trying and trying and trying until you find something that works for you. Well, that's great. And it's true. However, if you're the person, like I'm on my 13th or 12th or 13th medication, cocktail of medication. So going through all that over and over, withdrawal and symptoms and side effects, and adding more pills because of this, that, and the other thing, it gets to be at a point where you're like, okay, you know what? Like, enough's enough. Where do you draw the line? Do you hope for these things, or do you just finally settle that that's who you are? And I think human beings it's easy to settle into something that's comfortable. So therefore, it becomes harder to hold on to hope.
I can see that. I can see how that becomes a really real thing. I think that the words try and the words hope, they come up a lot in the work that I do. And one thing I don't assume automatically is that the clients I'm working with haven't been trying for a really long time. So, to use a phrase like, come on, you just have to try, would be unfair, because it's almost like making an assumption that trying hasn't been happening the entire time.
Yes.
We talk about things that have been tried and how much more do you want to try and what do you want to try next, but not this idea of, come on, you just have to try, because that's just it seems insensitive to me. So I try to very much avoid that if I can.
So funny, my dad kind of accepted a little bit of my illness because he can read about it and it's scientific and there's medicine for certain things. So for him, that becomes tangible. But he said to me the other day, oh, I was depressed once for 3 weeks and I'll never do that again. I was like, what? How can you control that? He's like, well, after your mom died, I was depressed. And I was like, no, you were sad. There is the biggest difference between sadness and depression, and please don't confuse the two. No one can say, oh, that's it, I'm done with depression, I'm not going to be depressed again. Because if we could, I'd snap the finger, we'd all be happy, wouldn't we?
True. I mean, this idea that depression can be a choice that you can opt in or out of is a real interesting way of people looking at depression. The two different kinds of depression, I mean, there's probably a million different kinds of depression, but the idea of the external depression, I think it's called exogenous depression, the depression that we experience because of life circumstance, is one thing. And that's the kind of depression from which people tend to recover more quickly, because as we can move away from certain circumstances, maybe grief being one of them. Some people experience depression after grief. Many don't. You're right. Sadness comes into play. But then there's the internal, the endogenous depression, the depression about which people have no idea what the cause is. Where did this come from? Why am I experiencing this? And that's the part that people with major depressive disorder, PDD, experience, because it's an internal thing. It's just this idea of I'm depressed and I don't even know why. And that's so much harder to overcome. So I think people need to understand that there's such a difference between those two things. If somebody loses a job and experiences a period of depression because of some existential crisis that they're in about the meaning in their lives, well, that is more likely to be alleviated through new circumstances than somebody who's experiencing this internal sense of dread about the world and themselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely so true.
The idea of, the way your dad conceptualizes depression or BPD as something that he can relate to because of science or medicine just, gets into the idea of people having to recognize the idea that mental illness is actual illness. It's not this mythological thing. It's a real experienced biological thing that people are living with.
Absolutely. I'm writing an article right now about that for a friend's site because I'm trying to explain that in no way would any human being choose to put themselves in this situation. Sometimes I refer to it as well as when people are slamming gay people or whatever the case may be. I'm thinking, if you come out, that's very courageous and brave of you, because a good percentage of society, and especially in the States, is not going to be happy about it. But the courage that you have shown to show your true self and accept your true self, it's the same with mental illness. Some people will never have the voice to speak about it, but they will heal through other people's voices.
I agree 1,000,000%. Do you see then how much value you have to people who are, look, you're in two of the more marginalized populations in the world. That is part of you. You are gay and you experience mental illness. The idea that somebody would choose to be part of the two of the more marginalized populations in the world is kind of ridiculous.
It really is. Like, who wants to put themselves out there and say, okay, pick on me, please?
Totally. My daughter came out as bisexual a couple of years ago. She has a girlfriend now, and it's been, her bravery, if you will. She recently went to her first Pride Day, and
awesome.
She's very much an advocate. She wants to do what I do for a living, which is wonderful. It's been one of the joys of my life. And one of the things that's most precious to me is my work with LGBTQ. I have several clients who are in various stages of transformation, who are transgender, gay, lesbian. And that's another one of those situations where I will never understand the world the way that person understands the world. So there's so much education in it for me. Again, the idea of a client coming in who's transgender, and I know almost nothing about what that's like, that my clients teach me so much. And all I want to be is an ally to that person, and somebody who understands, and somebody who kind of, walks that journey with them as much as I can. But I never assume to know what that must be like.
I think a lot of people with mental illness, like I know personally, I feel when I go out, I feel transparent almost. Like I feel like I'm wearing a shirt that says everything that's wrong with me, and everyone that walks by is like reading going, oh my God, what is wrong with this chick? Because you feel like you project how you feel about yourself onto other people. So if you feel that way about yourself, why the hell would not everybody else feel that? So projecting your own thoughts really onto other people is another huge challenge, because your friends don't really think the same way about you as you think about yourself. So again, that's the ability of being able to hold two truths, that I feel like shit most of the time and I don't think I'm very good at much, but at the same time, I might get a few messages now and then that say, you know what, that letter really helped me, or it saved my life, or whatever the case may be. And that kind of, not that it boosts my ego, but it gives me a sense of confidence,
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think, the idea of ego is such a huge part of our lives. I think back to the beginning of our conversation, talking about affirmation. What do you think it was like for me that you even asked me to do this with you?
I feel opposite. I feel like, oh my God, who would want to do this with me? So I feel like so blessed as a therapist would want to come on and talk to me as, quote, a nobody, right? And that's how my head would work. So you think one way, probably the opposite way that I'm thinking, and I'm thinking the opposite way you're thinking.
Yeah, here I am thinking about a person who is taking a risk to put herself out there in as many ways as she can. And this person actually wants to take time to talk to me. It is like a swelling of ego for me in a sense, and it is very affirming for me. And one of the things that I'm also very clear with clients about is the extent to which I have days when I really doubt myself. Even in the art of therapy, I doubt my skill set. So I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or not, but there are some days when I go home, I'm like, who the hell am I to even think I have the right to do this? And then I have days when I come home and I'm like, I am king of the world. I am so good at this. And really what that speaks to is that not every session goes the way I want it to. I have some really complex interactions with people and difficult interactions with people. And there are some clients with whom I really struggle, and that's real. So one of the things, I've recently moved into supervising interns. I work in private practice in one town in Jersey, but I also work for a not-for-profit agency in another part of Jersey doing some per diem hours. And through that agency, I'm afforded the opportunity to supervise interns who want to be social workers. And it's a wonderful experience. And again, what comes up is I don't know everything. I will never know everything. I know some things and I can help you with some things. So I will have clients, I'll have interns sit in with some of my client sessions when I get client permission. And I purposely will choose at least one client with whom I know I'm going to struggle just so the intern can see me struggle, see what that looks like, because I am going to at least once a day feel like, oh, God, that was just brutal. And that's why, thank God for supervision groups and other clinicians with whom I work. And I need to know that other people experience those things too. So in the very same way that when we're on Twitter or even in regular life, we benefit from knowing other people are experiencing what we experience. On the other side of it, clinically as a therapist, I also need to know that other therapists experience the struggle.
Huge stigma, especially in any dominated field like medicine or sports or whatever. There's just such a huge stigma, especially for men, to talk about mental health. And I think the more that we talk about it with our kids, the easier a conversation it's going to become. And it's just going to be like talking about the birds and bees. You got to mention the birds and bees. You got to talk about suicide. You got to talk about depression. Those are just going to become things that you need to talk to your children about.
I couldn't agree more. I do a lot of work through Bowen family systems theory. Murray Bowen is another theorist who I really hold near and dear. I'm certified in Bowen family systems theory. And a lot of, to get into all 8 of his concepts would just take the rest of my life. But 2 things that come about that you and I are talking about that relate is the idea of emotional reactivity as opposed to thoughtful response. And I think most of the time we are prone to emotionally react as opposed to thoughtfully respond. But the other thing is the idea of generational perspective. What do we talk to our kids about? What messages do we pass down to our kids that we pick up along the lines that maybe our parents didn't pass down to us, but we were fortunate enough to learn in other places? Right back to the idea of talking about mental health. I want to talk to my kids about mental health as much as I possibly can. What's been a very dicey part of it for me is that in my experiences with panic disorder and generalized anxiety, I've wanted to some degree, keep some of that stuff away from my kids. And that's a very fine line for me. And I'll tell you why I think that way. The first time I experienced a full-blown panic attack was on a ride from Belleville, New Jersey to Trenton, New Jersey to my daughter's soccer tournament. And I was on the Jersey Turnpike, and all of a sudden this came over me like I was imploding from the inside out. And my daughter is sitting next to me and she's 12. And my thought as I'm experiencing this is, I do not want my daughter to know that all is not right with the world. To me, there's always the idea of the DNA is already there, but how much of these anxieties do I want to pass on to my kids? I want them to have awareness, but I don't want to teach them to be anxious people. And that relates a lot, not only to panic disorder, but generalized anxiety. I'll give you an example of how that's pervaded my life because I've written a lot about it. When my kids were younger, fear of everything as a parent was part of my life. Fear of what they ate, fear of how much they ate, fear of them playing in the park with other kids. Will they get sick? Will they choke on their food? I wouldn't allow my children to eat in the back seat of the car because if I couldn't get to them if they were choking, I was sure they would die. Putting them on rides and amusement parks, part of me wanted to keep them from that, but the other part of me realized, don't cheat your kids of these experiences. So my coping skill was put them on the rides, glance over every now and then, but look away because a part of me always saw one of my kids being tossed off a ride on the Jersey Shore and into the middle of the ocean. It's just so unreasonable. And so trying very hard for most of my life to not put those anxieties on my kids has been a big part of my life. At the same time, we want our children to be aware that these things exist so they can talk about them. That's so complex. Even saying it out loud reminds me of the complexity of it.
Absolutely. And what's funny is that human beings are going to spend the rest of eternity trying to study the brain, the mind, when they're limited by that itself to study it. Does that make sense?
Totally.
You're studying something, but you're already within its limits because you stuck with your limits of what you know and what you've learned and how much you can learn. And the human brain is far more complex than anyone's ever going to figure out.
Completely. And I think that there was a moment when I thought in my own life, and maybe a lot of people think this, that mine was the most complex brain, that I'm the one experiencing this. Nobody knows what this is like. And the more exposure I've gotten to more people, the more I realize, wow, there are 40 million people in the States alone with diagnosed anxiety disorders. And that's just the people who are diagnosed.
Yes.
So to me, anxiety probably pervades more people's lives than we'd ever be wanting to know.
The way the North American, I've traveled a bit and I spent some time in South America and a little bit in Europe, and North America as a whole is A, very uptight about most things, and B, we are in such a rush to get everything done to die. That's it. That's what we do. We hurry and save and rush, and then we hope to God we make it to age 65 so we can hurt with our arthritis and enjoy our lives then? No. It's not the way things go in South America. You enjoy your days down there. The shit still gets done, but it just doesn't get done with this unnecessary anxiety and angst and worry, because it's most of the time it's unnecessary. It's just built into our society so much. Everyone's anxious.
Great point. I don't know. I sometimes think that Europe doesn't have anxiety. They don't even know what it is. I don't know. That could just be my idealizing Italy, people drinking wine in the middle of the day with their lunch. The idea of just sort of like, you're right, things will get done. Stuff will get taken care of. There's not this mad rat race going on that we experience here in North America. I feel like sometimes I just watch the rat race out my window. Cars speeding by in school. I have a high school across the street I'm looking at the high school through my window right now, and it's a school zone, but cars will just be zooming through it as if they need to get to this place so badly, no matter if they kill a high school student on their way there. How are they rushing to? Well, how do you structure your days? What do you spend most of your time doing?
I'm trying to actually make a structure now because it's really hard some days. It was funny, last Wednesday I had a couple of podcasts booked for Thursday, and then all of a sudden I just got this weird feeling and I canceled my podcast, and I woke up Thursday so freaking depressed I couldn't move. I was crying all day. So I tried to schedule little things. So I have a routine in the morning. I'll get up with my roommate, we have a coffee, and then he goes to work, and then I'll try and do some writing. I set a little bit of time every day to do some reading. Even if I can't write, if the thoughts aren't coming, I still make the attempt to, so it's like a scheduled time, because I find when you have no routine whatsoever, everything just becomes, what time is it? What day is this? You just lose a sense of everything. So I just try and make little tangible goals that I can manage through each day, and then at the end of the day, at least I can say, I may not have accomplished anything grand, but maybe I got a podcast episode edited, and that's something. So I think for me, the key is building tangible goals instead of these huge, enormous goals and pressure that we place on ourselves, that not that they're unrealistic, but they're unrealistic to achieve all at once. So if you take that huge goal and break it down into tangible steps, you feel a little bit better if you've accomplished something. And then maybe the next day you accomplished nothing, but the day before you did something. So that gives you a little bit of hope that the next day could be a little bit better.
There's a little bit of therapist who lives in you, Jody.
I know. I've done a lot of reading. I've been to a lot of therapists, and I did intensive trauma therapy for 3 years, and I took a 6-month-long trauma intensive coaching course. So I think I'm pretty well read and pretty well educated on a lot of things. I just honestly don't have the credentials behind my name to do it. It's sometimes hard to feel a part of something, and if you can get a group of people together that have the same type of issues and put them in a safe space, the support from one another, it won't even, I may be guiding the support at the beginning, but at the end of it, everyone's just going to be supporting each other. So everyone's going to benefit from helping, even if you feel really shitty. I might post something totally suicidal-ish in the morning saying life sucks or whatever, and then 4 hours later I post something positive. People are like, what's wrong with you? Are you like a hypocrite? I'm like, no, that's how I felt this morning. This is how I feel this afternoon. Now, I may still feel shitty, but I may have decided at that time, you know what? Just because I feel shitty doesn't mean that everyone else should feel shitty. So why don't I put out some positive quotes for people? I may not accept them at that time, but at least I feel a little bit better, because if I put them out, maybe they will help someone.
That's an amazing thing. It makes me think about one of the other ways that I work with people in terms of the mind having different parts. So as much as there might be a client of mine who thinks about suicide from time to time, that's part of that person. Another part is the part that brought them to therapy to talk about it. Another part of them is the part of them that goes about their day and keeps them engaged with people and accomplishes things like what you're accomplishing right now. So not the entirety of the person is suicidal. That's a part of them. And you just kind of illustrated that really clearly, that you might be thinking this on one level, but on the other side of the coin, you want to put things out there for people to be inspired by, or that maybe lifts mood to some degree. I have a client who has this wonderful attitude towards this, where if he wakes up in the morning and he's feeling shitty and depressed, he tries to formulate a plan for how he's going to get himself out of that by noon. What is he going to do to take control of the day? And this is somebody who grew up with very abusive parents, an extremely narcissistic mother whose sense of himself is really low and poor, and he copes with this every day. And he's gotten so much stronger. And now he realizes that there's a part of him that can dictate the course of his own day, even though it's hard. And that's another thing. When I say that about a client, that doesn't mean to say that this is not a hard thing to do. I recognize how much of a struggle it is to wake up feeling depressed and try to figure out, how am I going to make part of this day count? How am I going to make it better? Easier said than done. It's true. But what I hope people understand is that even in its hardness, it is doable. To some degree, it's doable. You kind of illustrate that very well, I think.
I agree with you, absolutely. I don't know. It's hard to put yourself out there feeling that way, I think, for many people, because there's such a fear of the repercussions. Like, to be quite honest, there is no possible reason that cops should be coming to any mental health call unless there's a gun or a weapon involved. That's the end of story. They shouldn't be handcuffing people and putting them in the hospital in a locked room for 5 hours. Does not do anything for anyone's mental health. It really doesn't. So as soon as the whole system, we have to get training into the police system and into the schools and into the hospitals, because personally I've experienced this. Not too long ago, I was hauled off by the cops because I posted something online, and it wasn't even like I'm going to kill myself. It was just thoughts of in that direction, dark thoughts, and someone took it the wrong way from out of province, called my old work. Next thing I know, cops are at my door, dragged down to the hospital, sat in a room for 5 hours. And literally, for me, fear of hospital overtakes fear. And I'm not afraid of death. Okay, so fear of hospital overtakes fear of death. So I can literally be ready to jump off a building. And if you put me in a hospital, my mask is on so quick, you won't know what happened. I will answer every question you need in the right manner so I can get the hell out. That's how bad my fear of hospitals was. I was in a room for 5 hours. I saw a psychiatrist for literally 67 seconds, and I saw a crisis worker for about 3 minutes. And as soon as I explained coping skills and everything else, they figured, oh, what the hell is she doing in here anyway? Go home. But that was a 5-hour process of being contained in an area that makes you feel like a criminal, not like a patient.
Wow. Oh my God. It makes me think of, in my neck of the woods here, we have what's called a mental wellness check. And it is the process through which somebody who's really concerned about another person will call the police and have the police investigate that person. The experience you're having shouldn't have happened. I mean, the purpose of a wellness check is really just to check on the person's wellness. If the cops go to a house and see that a person is secure with family, they ask them some questions, they don't get taken away in handcuffs. It's just not supposed to happen. I used to do psychiatric screening for St. Joe's Hospital here in Paterson, New Jersey. My role there was much different than my role now. When you do psychiatric screening, you're doing, commitments in psychiatric emergency rooms, determining commitment status, or you're going out into the community and determining whether or not somebody should be brought into the hospital based on your interview with them. And you make a good point about people being able to know the system well enough to know how to answer questions. That happens with people all the time. So really, for when I was in that role, all I really had was the snapshot of the person in the moment, and I had to make a determination based on that. Now, in my experience with that, only people who got violent with the police were taken away in handcuffs, and that was for their protection as well as everybody else's protection. But the idea that you said you were taken away in handcuffs.
Their reasoning was, first of all, I can't be left. Okay, the first time it ever happened, there was a 12-hour difference, might I add, between the time of the tweet and the time that the cops came. 12 hours. I was actually in bed eating ice cream at 10 o'clock at night, and they pounded on my door. I was like, what the hell? So I answered the door, they come in. Now my roommate's not home. So because my roommate's not home, they figure that I still can be unsafe. So they put me in handcuffs, and they say they have to put you in handcuffs because that's the rules in the back of a cop cop car. And the second thing is they say that they'll lose their job if they leave and I kill myself. And I said to them, dude, it's been 12 hours. Like, no offense or anything, but if I was going to off myself, it would have been 11 and a half hours ago. So you're really late on this. So me having to go to the hospital after being completely calmed down just escalated everything into a panic attack.
Oh, God. That just sounds like it.
It's just not the wrong. And you know what's funny is the cops that I've dealt with have been nice, but so uneducated about mental health that I've had. The one cop had a really bad experience with a small child who passed away. And when weed became legal up here, he said for the first time he smoked a joint with his wife, and he just broke down, started crying. And he was thinking about this kid, and I'm trying to teach him about, I'm in the hospital and he's sitting with me and I'm the patient, and I'm now teaching him about PTSD, its effects, and the fact that if he doesn't go talk to someone, that these nightmares and everything else are just going to continue to get worse. And I'm thinking to myself, how ironic is this situation? You don't know anything about it. You're dragging me down to a place where half the mental health people who work here don't know anything about anything. And now I'm educating you.
Yeah. That really is kind of backwards. And the idea that you spent maybe 3 minutes with a crisis worker and, a hot minute with a psychiatrist doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all. With the cops, a person has to be mobilized here in Jersey to a hospital on somebody's authority. And that's what the role of the mobile crisis worker, the psychiatric screener, that was my role. So if I did an interview with somebody and then my partner interviewed the person's family, if there was family present, we made a determination based on, a risk assessment basically. And only when we signed a transport order and actually gave it to the cops did they then call an ambulance to have somebody brought to the hospital. I don't think I ever actually saw it once where a person had to be handcuffed and thrown in the back of a police car. I mean, that's trauma in and of itself.
It's so funny because I have a neighbor and she has a daughter, and I believe the daughter's bipolar, and she's on and off her meds. So sometimes she just loses it. And she's been brought out in handcuffs literally about 4 or 5 times. And even the once they called for an overdose, and she didn't actually overdose, but the way the paramedics treated her and the cops was just I was standing on top of my balcony just shaking my head, and they're staring at me like, mind your own business. I'm like, no, this is my business, man. This is everybody's business. You cannot treat people like that. There's a way to treat people and there's a way not to. And if you're not trained in mental health, get the hell out of the health industry.
It's a great point, Jody. I know that when the Nutley Police Department is specifically trained by the Passaic County psychiatric screeners on how to work with people who are experiencing acute mental illness symptoms in the moment, so that there isn't that sense of humiliating a person, mistreating a person. And again, the only time a person should be taken in handcuffs is when they become so aggressive that they are a threat to themselves and to other people. And that's really it. Oh goodness, Jody, you've had some major experiences.
They're interesting, that's for sure. It keeps life interesting.
Oh, totally. So your goals going forward are to do a peer support group, which is amazing. Do you ever think about schooling or anything else in terms of more work in mental health?
I would love to. I did college and I did 2.5 years of university, and I'm still paying off my OSAP loan. So it will be difficult for me to go to school because of financially. We don't really do much in bursaries or credits around here in Canada. I had a scholarship when I was a kid, when I was 18, to go to North Carolina and West Virginia, but my mom was sick at the time, so that was going to be original plan was going to go 4 years there, then come back up here, and I wanted to actually be either an ER doctor or a psychotherapist. That was my original goal. Then when that didn't pan out, I was going to try for a paramedic, and then I've lived so long on my own, it just bills built up, and you got to pay rent, and there's not time, and there's not money. It's really the problem. If I won the lottery, I'd go back to school, sure, but since I can't do that, I'm trying to just do the little things that I can do, and I figure if I can start peer support, I mean, you don't need a license for that.
Totally. And people are going to benefit from that because you have experience. I mean, you do your diligence with researching and reading, but you also have so much personal experience. And I think that's the single biggest key is the personal experience. College is just becoming such a challenge for people. The idea of coming out with so much debt that, people in my profession are never going to make the amount of money needed to pay back the debt. So I think of myself now, I just turned 50 on June 10th. I'm a brand new 50-year-old. And I still have about $80,000 of student loan debt that I've become much less anxious about because I pay whatever I can for a month. And, when I die, the debt's not coming with me.
I'm like that too. I do my taxes, and then there's GST and HST. They just keep it forever. I never pay them anything. I'm just like, eventually it'll be paid off through my GST and HST credits that they owe me.
Totally. And in the meantime, no one's ever going to take the degrees I've earned away from me. And I'm really kind of a late bloomer too. And that also plays heavily into my work. There are people who really feel it's an outrageous suggestion to go back to school at 35 or 40 years old. But because I was basically screwing around a lot of my life when I was younger, I started college in 1988 and I graduated college in 2000. So it took me 12 years, a very kind of twisty, winding, irresponsible, and undedicated road to get to graduation. And then I did my master's in social work and finished that when I was 35. So definitely not the traditional road for me. And that really comes into play with a lot of my clients who feel as if it's all gotten behind them. There's no time or no reason to do anything anymore. I can't see life that way. I don't feel like there's this whole schedule thing because I never really went by the schedule. The irony is my daughter graduated when she was 21 and she's definitely on a different path than I am. And she just graduated last month and she's 21 years old. So that is so opposite of what I experienced. I try to use that sense of my own life to encourage. And I was kicked out of my first high school for failing everything, basically. So when I have adolescents who come in with their parents and they're struggling in school, I'm first to say, look, I failed 5 classes at Hudson Catholic High School, including art, because if I fail, I'm going to fail epically. So, it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
That's so the truth. I hate to do this, but I have therapy in 3 minutes.
Hey, all right.
But it was such a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope that we can, do this again on a podcast and maybe another time just to chat.
Jody, I'd be happy to. If I could say one more thing, just, anybody listening, please visit healingpros.com. It's HEALINGPROSE.com. It's my blog. I write about mental health. Follow me on Twitter at scribetherapist.com. Jody, thank you so, so much. You are an inspiration, and I firmly mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much. You are an inspiration, and you've been very helpful. I feel like I had a mini therapy session in there today, so that was good too.
Hey, enjoy your therapy, and you tell your therapist I said hello.
I will do, and we'll talk soon, Vincent. Thank you so much.
Be well, Jody. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, as we wrap up the show, I would like to give a special thanks to our guest, Vincent Fitzgerald, for sharing his time and his story with us. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss another one. If you have any comments or questions or wish to be a guest on the show, you can message me at OneLastKick71 on Twitter, Jody BEE on Facebook, or through my website, jodybetty.com. Links can be found on the podcast website. Thank you for spending your time with us. Hopefully we can help to eliminate or at least reduce the stigma around mental health. Until next time, take care and be well.